Welcome to the 8th and final part of a series where we've built a social media with React and Django. In the previous video we built the search users page, but in this video we're finishing off the series by building the settings page where a user can update its details and log out of their account. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you for following and I hope you've learned a bunch. But if you have any requests for extra videos, just please drop a comment in the comment section. But with that said, let's get into it. How I want to structure this video is we're first going to slightly edit our user serializer. Then we're going to create our APIs to log out and update our users' details. Then we're going to pass our current user details to our front end and save them in local storage. Then finally build out our settings page on our front end. So the first thing we need to do is head into our serializers.py file in our Django app to start adding these extra fields to our serializer. So I'm going to go into my folder, then in backend base and serializers.py. And you can see we have this user serializer which we built in our previous video. So we actually only need to add two more fields. So we need to add a bio. Then we also need to add an email. Okay. So the email, first name and last name are just default in a user model, but we created the bio itself in our models.py file. So that's what we need to do for the serializers.py. Now we need to actually go into our views.py file to create our API to edit our user details. So I'm going to go into my views.py file, then just scroll to the bottom and we'll create our new API. So as we're updating user details, this needs to be something called a patch request, which we use to update values in our database. So we're going to do @API_view. Then we're using a patch request to update our details. Then we also want to be authenticated to call this API. So we have to do permission classes, then is authenticated @permission classes. Then I'm just going to call this API update user details. Pass in a request. Now we need to grab our data from our front end as we're going to pass in our updated data. Okay, so we'll just grab that data from our request in request.data. Then we also want to grab our user, so we can do this with error handling like we've done before. So if I just copy this, and what this is doing is just getting our logged in user as we're updating their details. Okay, just change that to user. Now the next thing I want to do is pass this through a serializer. This is going to be a bit different to the way we usually use a serializer as we're updating information. So the way we do this is we're going to do serializer equals user serializer. So the first thing we need to pass through is our user which we're updating. Then we need to pass in the data we're updating for that user. And we're also just going to say partial equals true, and that basically means we can update individual aspects of the user. So we can update their username without updating their email, for example. So now we've created that serializer. To update it, we have to make sure it's valid. So otherwise it won't work. So if we do serializer.isValid, then if it is valid, we can save our changes by doing serializer.save. Then we can just return our response. So we could just do serializer.data, which is just going to return our updated data of our user. But I also want to say that the success was true, okay, if it was correct. So what we're going to do is put this in an object, then grab all of the keys and values from the serializer.data, such as the username, email, bio, etc. And then I also want to pass success is true. Okay. However, if it wasn't valid, then we just need to return success is false, and we'll also return the serializer.errors. And then success is false. Okay, so that looks good to me. That's our update user details API. Now I also just want to create our logout API. It's going to be pretty simple. So this is just going to be a post request. Okay, so we'll do @API_view to post request. We want to be authenticated, so just like always, permission classes is authenticated. Then we'll call this logout. Now to log out, basically we just have to remove our cookies. Okay, so what we can do is create a response. So we'll put this in a value called res for response. Then we're going to say response was successful. So success is true. Now, if this is true, it has to be in a try catch, or try except in Python, sorry. So if it's successful and everything runs, it's just going to run this code and it's going to return success is true. Otherwise, we're going to return success is false. Okay. Now, to actually remove our cookies, we can do res delete cookie, which is just a built-in function of Django. We have to choose the cookie we're deleting, okay? So if we scroll to our login API, you can see we store our cookies in an access token called access_token with its key, and then a refresh token. So these are the keys we need to grab and delete, okay? So the way we do this is we pass in our access token, but we don't just pass in the key, we also have to pass in some of its parameters. So we have to pass in the path it's at, which was just the default route. Then we also have to state the same site, which was none, okay? So we have to make sure we have these extra details as well as the key, okay? So I'm just going to copy and paste that and do the same for our refresh token. And then we'll just return our response, okay? So it's going to return success is true and delete our new tokens, okay? So we've created these two APIs to update our user details and log out of our account. So we need to go into urls.py to make routes for these. So I'm just going to import these APIs, which are the last APIs we're building. So we made a logout and we made update user details, okay? So let's create paths for these. We'll do update underscore user, update user details. We'll also make one called logout. And just call logout, okay? So I'll just show how these are working. So if I log in, so I'm at the API token to log into our account. You can see success is true. Then I can also call another API. So such as if we just get the user data for MattMakesCode, so user underscore data, you can see we get this data as we're logged in. However, if I call our logout, and I post, you see we get success is true, so we did log out. And when I refresh this and I try and get that data, you can see we haven't got our authentication credentials and we've logged out of our account. So that's the logout API. Now we want to update our details. So if I go to our other API, which we called update user, so we need to log in again, as we're going to be updating the logged in user's details. So success is true. Now if we do update user, so with the update user details, you can see it's a patch request. We have to pass in some of the data we're going to update. So if I just want to update the bio for MattMakesCode, I'm just going to say updated bio. You can see we got returned updated bio. And now if we get user details for MattMakesCode, so that's the user data, not details, you can see we got an updated bio, okay? So both them APIs are working. Now we actually need to pass our user details to our front end, so that when we're in our settings.py file, as you can, our settings root in our front end, as you can see here, we have all of our user details in our forms that the user already has, such as its bio already has, its email already has, first name, last name, username, etc. So we want to pass that data to our front end so it's already on our page, okay? So the way we can do that is actually pass it to our front end when we log in and then save it in local storage like we've done in the previous video, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the username which the user uses to log in the form, okay? So we grab that from the request.data. So we're just going to get username equals request.data and then username, okay? And then we want to grab that user with the username. So we can do it like we did here. in the update API, where we can just validate the user exists. Okay, so we're back in our login API. So we're grabbing that user with the username. Okay, then we want to pass some extra data as well as success is true, such as the user's username, bio, email, first name, last name. Okay, as you can see here, these are the details we're putting through, okay, to our front end. So I'm going to create another object called user inside this user data, and we're going to pass in the username, which we can just say is the username we grabbed here. But for the rest, we're going to get the bio, which is the user we got here, dot bio. Okay, so we're getting the bio. If we go back into our serializers, we can see some other things we need. So we want the email. We don't need the profile image, as we're not going to be displaying that on our front end in the settings page, but we need our first name and last name as well. So we'll get the email, which will be user.email. Then we'll get the first name, and the last name. I'll tell you what, we might as well just make this user.username. Okay, so that looks good. We pass in the username, bio, email, first name and last name, so we can display this on our settings page. Now, if we send this to our front end, we log in, we want to save this in local storage. So we're going to come out of our backend. That's all our backend stuff sorted, and we can go into our front end and save it in local storage. So we'll close backend, go into our front end, and go into our use auth context. And in here, you can see in the previous video, we created this user data where we saved the username, okay, with the user they log in. But instead, we're going to grab the user and all of its attributes and save them in user data, okay? So what I want to do is just create an object, and we'll call this user data. And this is going to contain the username, which is the data dot user dot username, okay? Then we do the same for the rest. Dot bio, sorry. Data dot user dot email, and then the first name, and then also the last name. Just copy and paste that and change this. Okay, now instead of just saving the username, we're going to save this new object with all these different values. Okay, so in our local storage, we should have username, bio, email, first name and last name when we log in, and it's just going to save in our local storage forever, really. So if we go back to our front end, and I'm just going to log out. So we'll get rid of these tokens. I'll refresh. You can see we're logged out. But when I log back in, you should see in our local storage, so we go to inspect, application, and local storage, you can see we have this user data, and we have our username, bio, email, first name, and last name, okay? And now, when we create our settings page, we can display these in our fields, so we know what we already have and we can update them, okay? So now that's all done, we could go ahead and call our APIs and our endpoints. So we'll just close these, and we'll go to API and endpoints and create our new endpoints. So the first one we'll create is our logout endpoint. It was a post request. Now we want to just call logout, as that's what we called the root. And we can return response.data. And then our second API was the update user. So we'll do update user. And this API is going to be a patch request. Now we want to pass in, you can just look into our euros.py to see what we called it. We called it update user. We also need to pass in our values, so we'll just pass it in here. So these are going to be all the filter updating, such as username, bio, email. Then there's one more thing we actually need to add. As we're updating a profile image, we're updating an image, we have to send an image over to our backend. What we need to do is update our content type to something called multi-part form data. And this is going to allow us to send images to our backend from our front end. So we need to create a new header. It's just like this. And then we create a header called content type. And the content type is going to be multi-part and slash form data. Okay, so we need that as well, and that's going to allow us to update our profile image as well. So that's our response. Then we want to just return response.data, and there are endpoints. Okay, so the next thing we do is actually build out our settings root. Okay, so I'm going to go into my folders, close our backend. In our front end, we're going to go into roots and create our new root. Okay, so we'll call this settings.js, create a settings component, then we'll export this. So export default settings. We'll also just return some text, so we'll just do h1 settings so we can see that this root has been created. Then go into our app.js and create this new root. So we'll just import settings and create a new root for that. And we'll put it at the path settings here. So when I go back to my local host, and instead of MattMakesCode, we go to settings. You can see we get settings here and our root has successfully been created. Now I just want to create an icon in the navbar so we can get to this settings. So we can go to React icons here. We'll just type in settings. And then we can just find an icon we like, and I like this one. So just copy and paste these. Go to our app.js. And I want to go to, I want to go to our navbar. And just copy this. Create. There you are. So we've got this new icon. We're going to settings. Don't need these. And when we go back to our React, if we go to a different page, then go back to this icon, you can see we go back to settings. Okay, so that's the root all set up. Now we can actually start building out our settings page. All right. So when I go back to my Visual Studio Code, I want to close these, and we want to import flex. Okay, it's not important, so we'll just copy and paste some imports from another page. And we'll probably use most of these, so we'll just go along and update them as we go. So just wrap our app in a flex. So I'm just going to show what we're building on the bottom right here. So we need a flex so we can center everything. So then we need a vertical stack, so we can stack the header and then our form on top of each other vertically. Then we want a heading, which we'll just call settings. Then we also want our form, which we'll put in another vertical stack. And then we can structure our form here. So you can see we have a profile picture, a username, email, first name, last name, and bio, okay? And then a button to save our changes, and then a button to log out, okay? So I'm gonna put this button out of our form to log out. Then we can start building out our form. So what we need is form control. We could do this for each input. So we can have a form label. We do this for our profile image. So we'll do profile picture. And then as it's an input, Chakra actually doesn't provide a component for this. So we're just going to do a regular input. And this is going to be type file. Okay. So we just copy and paste this. But this time we're going to do the username. And then we'll actually use a Chakra input. And we'll just call, I tell you what, we'll edit all of that later, but this should be type text. Okay. Then we will just copy this and then paste it. Then we can update these. So it's going to be email, type email. Then we'll do first name. Then last name. Then we also want a bio, okay? So we'll do, sorry, it should be last name. Then we'll do bio, but instead of an input, we're going to do a text area. As bio, there'll be a lot of text. And this looks okay now, okay? So we just need to import form label and text area. So that looks pretty good. We have our profile image. We also need our save changes button. So we'll put this in our form vertical stack. So another button, which is save changes. You can see we have these here. Now we just want to do a bit of styling. So if we make this 100% width, and then we want to center this. So justify content, center. So that's centered now. And then we'll just do some padding on the top. So we'll just say 50 pixels. So that looks good. Now we want to center, style this form. So we want it to be 95% of the container. And we'll say this also needs to be 100%. So you can see that it fills out. So this is 95%. But we only want this to a certain width. So it will be 95% for a mobile, but if it goes anything beyond, let's say, give it maximum width. So if it goes anything beyond 500 pixels, you can see it just stops there. So that looks pretty good. Then we also want to align everything at the start. So this settings goes here. So if we do align items start, that looks pretty good. And then we also want to give a gap between our heading, form, and logout button. So we'll just say 20 pixels. So we got that there. Then for our visual stack, you got this width 100%, so it fills out the container. We also want to do align items start again. So everything starts at the start. See, we've got that save changes at the start there. Then I also want a gap, let's say 10 pixels between all of the forms, okay? So that looks good. Now, if I just edit this button for the save changes, we'll do 100%, we'll say color scheme is blue, and we'll just give a margin top of 10 pixels. So that looks pretty good. And then just change our logout button, and we'll just say color scheme is red. So this form looks pretty good now. So if I just edit the inputs so they have a background of white. So bg equals white. We'll do this for all the inputs. So it's like this. That looks a lot better. Now we've got the styling done. The next thing I want to do is have these fields filled out already, okay? So it's going to have the data the user already has. So the way we need to do that is grab the data from our local storage. So you can see we have on our inspect, you can see we go to application, we have our user data with our username, bio, email, first name, last name. So user, email, first name, last name, bio. So we just want to fill out these forms with the data we already have. So we're going to have to grab the data from our local storage. So we can do that by just grabbing our storage. So json.parse, as it will be saved as a string. So we need to put this into JSON, just like we did in the last video. And we want to get the user data key. Then what we want to do is save all of these in states, okay? So if we import useState, then we'll have a username state, and by default, if storage exists, so if this item exists, so just a bit of error handling, then we're going to save it to storage.username, which is the user data we had in our local storage. Otherwise, if it doesn't exist, well, if it didn't, it would throw an error, so we just want to handle that, and we'll just save it to nothing. So there'll be nothing in this field. So that's the username, and you can see if we do value equals username here, we get MattMakesCode. Now we want to do that for all of our others. So just copy and paste this. Instead of username, we'll do email, email, and email. Then add the value to our email field. Then our first name. And last name. And then just save them in our fields. So our first name, our last name, and then we want our bio. Like this. So value equals bio. Now, when we create this account, we may have not filled in the first name, last name, or email. So when we update this, so we did give an email, but we didn't give a first name, last name. But that's fine. We can actually give them one in this update form as we go along. So you can see it's got all of its values we want. Now, next thing we need to do is actually create, call the APIs, which allows us to update these and also log out. So the first thing I'll do is actually the updating. So what I'll do is create a new component called handle update, be asynchronous. Then we want to call update user, and then we're just going to pass in, as you can see here, if we go to our endpoints, in our update user, we're actually passing in an object, okay? Passing our data. So we need to pass in an object ourselves with all the different attributes. So we'll do username, so username, and so on and so on. So email, email, first name, first name. These to be equal to what they're saved in our Django backend. So we'll do last name, last name, then finally bio, sorry, not finally, then we'll also just add the profile image. Is equal to profile image. So we need to actually add that for a state. So just do profile image set profile image. Okay. So we have this update user. We're updating the username, profile image, email, first name, last name, bio. Now, if that doesn't work, we'll just alert error updating details. However, if it does work, we want to alert successfully updated details. Okay. At the moment, we're just updating the backend, but we also, as we're calling our storage here, we'd update our storage with it as well. Otherwise, these details are just going to stay the same. So we need to update them as well. So we're going to change our storage to our updated values. So we'll do local storage.set item. Then we need to get our user data key, which we're getting the storage from. Then we need to json.stringify, as we have to save it in a string. And then we'll just save these updated values, except from the profile image, as we're not grabbing that data, okay? So when we save it, it's going to save our local storage as well. So these will change with it. Now, if I just basically, at the moment, these aren't changing with our inputs. So we need to change them as, say, I type in here or I upload a file. We need to change these values so we can send it to our backend, basically. So the way we do that is using onChange. So when we change the file, when we upload a file, we do E for event. Then we have to do set profile image, which is setting the profile image here. Now, to grab the file which we're uploading, we have to do something called e.target.files, and then we grab the first file as we're only uploading one, okay? So e.target.files, and that's the profile image we're going to set it to. Now we have to do that also for our text, which will be slightly different. So we'll do onChange still, we'll have the event, set username, but this time it's going to be e.target.value. So when we type in here, so we have to say this first. When we type in here, it will save it to that value. Now we can do this for all of the other text input fields, but to their corresponding value. So this one's set email. This one will be set first name, then set last name, and finally set bio. So now we're going to be sending across all of the changed details: username, email, first name, last name, bio, and profile image. And all we have to do is, then we're just going to call our new function on click, so handle update. So this function we just created here. Now just make sure I save that. Now when we go here and I update the bio, so it was originally updated bio, now if it's updated bio 2 and I save it, see it's successfully updated. I go back to my home page, you see we have updated bio 2. I go back to my settings, you can see we have this 2 here, which because we saved it in local storage as well. So now if we test the image, so I'll just go to my desktop and I select this image here and I save my changes, updated successfully. I go back to my home page, we can see I have a new profile image, okay? So all of that is working perfectly, but at the moment we haven't actually implemented our logout button. So all we need to do is call that API on click, okay? So we'll create a new function and we'll call it handle logout. And what we'll do is we'll do try await logout. So that should call our logout API. And then if not, just alert error logging out. Make sure this is asynchronous. Okay. Now we also, when we log out, we also want to navigate back to our login page. So we'll import useNavigate. Create a navigator. And if we successfully log out, we just want to go to the login page. Okay. So we'll call that from our logout button. Now when we go back to our settings page and I click logout, we go back to our login page, so it successfully worked. And if I try to log back into MattMakesCode, you can see we're back at our account with our new profile image, our new bio, got our settings page, and all of that. So that's the end of the video, and that's also the end of the series. I just want to say thank you all for walking through the series with me. I hope you have a really good project at the end of this, and also will be really good if you're applying for jobs or you just want this as a side project to show off. You can see there's loads of functionality here involving React.js and Django. We got our home page, we can create posts. We got the main page where we can load more posts. We can search different users. So we got Joe Doe here. We got our settings page where we can update images. So much going on in this project, and it is really a really good project to have under your belt. Once again, thank you all for tuning in, and please follow any more content. If you haven't subscribed already, could you subscribe to the channel and like the video and comment any new suggestions for further content if you want me to deploy this project or add new features. Well, that's the end of the series, and thank you all for tuning in.